Welcome to another explainer. Today, we're tackling one of the most fascinating and honestly deeply philosophical concepts in literature, the erosion of rebels. We're going to map out that terrifying journey from pure idealism to outright villainy, diving right into the psychological terrain of some of the absolute greatest characters ever written. So, let me ask you something. Would you still read a story if you knew, right from the jump, that the rebel becomes the villain? And I need to be super clear here. We are not talking about some cartoonish, mustache-twirling bad guy who suddenly decides to be evil just for the fun of it. No. We are talking about the kind of villain who genuinely, deep down in their bones, believes they are still saving the world. The kind of character who thinks they're the hero of the story, even as they're completely tearing it apart. Okay, let's dive into this. Think about monumental stories like Les Misérables, Macbeth, and Frankenstein. In each of these timeless narratives, the line between hero and villain isn't some giant, impassable brick wall. It's a slow erosion. It's just a whisper. It's a series of tiny, seemingly justifiable choices. A decision that feels absolutely right up until the exact moment that it suddenly doesn't anymore. Section 1. The Rebel's Slow Erosion. We love to think of rebellion as this permanent, fixed state of righteous anger. But rebellion actually transforms entirely under the surface. It morphs and twists as the rebel gains ground. And because of that, we really need to reframe how we look at these narratives. The real question at the heart of this explainer is, at what point does a rebel stop being a rebel, entirely without noticing? Where exactly is that unseen, invisible moment of transformation? Section 2. Rebellion for Justice. Let's start by looking at Jean Valjean from Les Misérables. Valjean is a man punished not just for what he did, but by a society that absolutely refused to forgive him. His initial motivations are incredibly simple, right? He wants to survive, he wants to escape, he wants to resist a system that completely fails to see him as a human being. Like so many literary rebels, he begins his journey with absolute moral clarity. To him, the world is objectively wrong, and his simple rebellion against it is perfectly justified. Now, what's really interesting about this shift is how Victor Hugo refuses to let rebellion stay that simple. On one hand, you have the mindset of the truly oppressed. How do I survive? But as Valjean gains power and agency, that internal questioning fundamentally flips. It becomes, what do I become now that I can decide? Gaining power forces the rebel to suddenly bear the immense, crushing weight of moral authority and identity. Section 3. Macbeth, the Ambition Trap. Let's pivot to Macbeth. Remember, Macbeth isn't born a villain. Not at all. He starts out as a fiercely loyal, universally praised hero on the battlefield. But his rebellion isn't against societal oppression. It's against limitation itself. He starts asking, what if I deserve more? What if I just take what fate hasn't given me? This isn't about survival anymore. It's about pushing past the boundaries of his designated station in life. And that thought, it creates a tiny yet incredibly dangerous crack in his psychology. And watch how quickly this escalates. Through that initial crack, ambition just pours in. But ambition is almost immediately followed by doubt. So to conquer that doubt, he resorts to justification, convincing himself he's right, which inevitably leads to fatal action. Let me tell you, once Macbeth crosses that line, the moral collapse is swift, and he simply cannot stop the momentum. So the crucial point is that Macbeth shows us untethered rebellion doesn't bring freedom, it only brings control. And the horrific truth of the matter is that maintaining an iron grip always demands far more blood than the rebel ever budgeted for. Section 4. Frankenstein. Losing control. Now, if Valjean's rebellion was political and Macbeth's was personal, Victor Frankenstein's is entirely intellectual. He isn't fighting a king or a corrupt justice system. He's rebelling against nature, against death itself. He literally shatters the ultimate boundaries of creation because he wants to play God. But when he actually succeeds in breaking those ultimate limits, he doesn't feel the glorious triumph he expected. He only feels horror. And here is the ultimate tragedy of that story. The creature wasn't actually born evil. It becomes what the world makes it. Victor realizes, far too late, that a rebel can successfully break boundaries, sure, but they absolutely cannot control what comes after. The creator experiences a total, devastating loss of control over his own rebellion. A little bit of foresight really might have helped there, Victor. Section 5. The Universal Pattern. And this brilliantly illustrates the big picture. When we pull the camera back, We've got 3 different stories, 3 distinct rebels, and 3 wildly different transformations. You've got Valjean evolving into moral authority, Macbeth devolving into tyranny, and Frankenstein crashing into tragedy. Yet underneath it all, the structure of that erosion is exactly the same. Let's walk through that universal progression together. Step 1, rebellion almost always begins with clarity. The cause is just. It makes sense. Step 2, the rebellion succeeds and grows into power. But Step 3 is the trap. That power becomes something that must be maintained. And in the very act of maintaining power, the rebel stops asking questions, and they start forcing answers that nobody even asked for. Because that shift from hero to villain, from rebel to tyrant, it does not happen in a single dramatic flash of lightning. It happens in the quiet, dangerous, slow disappearance of doubt. Villainy takes root the moment a character loses their self-reflection. When a rebel stops doubting themselves, well, they stop being a rebel. Which leaves us with one final, lingering philosophical thought for today. Knowing what we know now about this process, do we actually love rebels? Or do we just love that fleeting, thrilling moment right before they change? The rebel is never just a static person. They are a beginning, and every beginning inherently contains its own ending. So keep asking questions, keep reflecting, and I will see you in the next explainer.